A Category 4 hurricane continues to push towards the North Carolina coastline at this hour. I'm Mike Naso from Internet Partnership Radio, bringing you continuing coverage of extremely dangerous Hurricane Earl. Here's the latest satellite of the entire Atlantic to put things in perspective, and as you can see, Hurricane Earl is spinning relentlessly, as the Hurricane Center puts it, straight towards the southeastern coast of the United States. However, you can see this trough in here along the areas here of the Midwest. It is moving in, and there will be westerlies as the hurricane pushes northwest, and that should turn the hurricane soon enough to miss most of the coast, but it's going to be so close that even a slight westward jog would make landfall with the eye wall over the areas of the Outer Banks and perhaps Cape Cod, and even if Earl misses, the impacts are going to be widespread. Behind Earl, we have Tropical Storm Fiona, which strengthened unexpectedly this morning but has since weakened. It's going to get sucked into Earl and pretty much dissipate here, moving northward. However, behind it is Tropical Storm Gaston, which is forecast to be yet again another hurricane. Remember, yesterday I mentioned there's really nothing to stop this one from taking shape, and right now that's exactly what it's doing. And this is going to be a force to be reckoned with as it continues to move generally west, maybe a bump to the northwest, before eventually curving back west, either north of the islands or in the Caribbean Sea. That's yet to be seen where it's going to go, but in the short term, a track like that. We're going to talk about all these features, but first and foremost, of course, Hurricane Earl. Here's the latest as of 5 p.m. Hurricane Earl was at 26.3 north, 73.3 west. Maximum sustained winds have increased to 135 miles per hour, gusting upwards of 160 potentially. It's moving northwest now at 17, and 941 millibars was recently recorded by the Air Force hurricane hunters. It should weaken and fluctuate down to a Category 3, but it's so large and powerful, the destructive capability of this hurricane cannot be overstated enough. And if it moves just a little west of the track, it could make a direct landfall. If it moves on track, the impacts are still going to be widespread. By the time Friday morning comes along, it will have passed North Carolina. By the time late Friday and early Saturday, that's when it could impact areas like Cape Cod, New Hampshire, and Maine, and then eventually on up into the Canadian Maritimes and out of here. But in the short term, Earl is taking dead aim at the east coast of the U.S. Now, we do have hurricane warnings out, and I wanted to read them off to you, so bear with me here as I do so. We have a hurricane warning, okay? A hurricane warning is in effect from Bogue Inlet, North Carolina, northeastward into the North Carolina-Virginia border, including Pamlico and Albemarle Sounds. We have a hurricane watch in effect for north of the North Carolina-Virginia border to Cape Henlopen, Delaware. Okay, so this is extending all the way up into Delaware now. We also have a hurricane watch from Woods Hole to Sagamore Beach, Massachusetts, including Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. You don't often hear this on tropical weather updates. Usually you hear, Cancun, Kingston, Jamaica. We're talking all the way up to Cape Cod here and potentially beyond that with this hurricane. A tropical storm warning is in effect from Cape Fear to west of Bogue Inlet, North Carolina, from the North Carolina-Virginia border to Sandy Hook, New Jersey, including Delaware Bay south of Slaughter Beach and the Chesapeake Bay south of New Point Comfort. And we also have that tropical storm watch in effect from Sandy Hook, New Jersey, on up to Woodhull, Massachusetts, including Block Island Sound and Long Island Sound, as well as north of Sagamore Beach to the mouth of the Merrimack River, Massachusetts. I got to hand it to the guys at the Hurricane Center. As you've seen the last few years, we've interacted with them and interviewed them before. Great guys, and anybody who has to come up with watches and warnings for this large an area of coastline and deal with a hurricane that I don't think anybody, including people at the Hurricane Center, myself, and even the computer models, expected to be this strong, this close to land. You got to give them credit for what they're doing here with this hurricane, because it is very, very dangerous. Now, you can see here's been the track of this hurricane, a classic Cape Verde hurricane, and as a matter of fact, it's moved almost straight west and then just a gradual turn west-northwest. Right now, if it continues that, it's going to be scraping right along the coastline. Anything closer will make a landfall. Regardless, this is going to go down in history already as one of the classic long-tracked Category 4 Cape Verde hurricanes, and you can see the model guidance with it is tightly clustered, but regardless, very, very close to the coast. And if it keeps this fast movement, right now it's heading straight for Charleston. If it keeps this fast movement another 12 hours and then starts that turn, it could make landfall, and that is the biggest concern. The second biggest is that regardless of that, we're going to have an impact. Look at the wind field on this thing. This thing is huge. We're talking hurricane force winds across this entire region here, and tropical storm force winds beyond that. And all of this, even if the center takes a track, say, somewhere like that, we're still talking about those hurricane winds, considering it doesn't get any larger in size, impacting a good part of North Carolina, and the tropical storm force winds. Even if you live along the North Carolina-South Carolina border, you have to be on alert, as again, this could really cause some problems. And again, 135 miles per hour, nothing to mess around with. Here's the satellite imagery of our Category 4 hurricane. It's parallel to the Abaco Islands and West Palm Beach. It's moving northwest, so Florida, you're okay. You're fine. But right now, this thing is continuing to progress straight towards the southeast coast. A better look at that on satellite, showing this beautiful hurricane. And note here this kind of plume of high cloud bursting away. This is an indication of the way the upper level winds want to take the hurricane, which is generally off towards the northwest, and then the north-northwest, and then the north, which is dangerously close to the South Carolina coast. Already, as the visible satellite showed, this eye is getting closer, and here's the reasoning. We have this trough of low pressure streaming through the Midwest. We have definitely some dry air around the hurricane, and the westerlies up here are going to eventually take this up and around the high pressure, and you can see that movement even better as we have the clouds streaming and the hurricane kind of everything jettisoning this on off towards the northwest and up and around. But the question is, it's so darn close to the coast, will it make landfall? We just don't know yet. In this day and age, track forecasts have improved dramatically, but no matter how well they are, when you're dealing with this strong a hurricane and an area that small with Category 4 winds, trying to decide whether or not it's going to be able to cross the coast here or move just offshore here a day and a half away, that's just hard to do at this point. You can see the visible satellite imagery as the hurricane starts to come into view. Definitely a good example of those clouds streaming in this direction. That's an indication the hurricane is going to make that turn. It'll probably miss the coast, but you'll probably get hurricane winds and a fierce battering from this already destructive hurricane. There's Bermuda. Bermuda, you lucked out with this one. The east coast of North Carolina, not so lucky at this time. Now, we do have Tropical Storm Fiona. As of 5 p.m., Fiona was at 20.2 north, 62.9 west. Winds were still 60 miles per hour, gusting to 70s, moving northwest at 997 millibars. It is expected to eventually curve on out with Earl and dissipate, but it could batter Bermuda before it does so. Actually, taking a look at the latest visible satellite imagery, it's not hard to see where the center of Fiona is. Right there, a little popcorn thunderstorm shower blowing up over the center. Again, it scraped along the islands and almost became a hurricane, 60 miles an hour, and dropping that pressure down with those reds earlier. It was trying to get close, but it's definitely not going to do so. You can see the models generally take it up and out and dissipate it, but there are a few indications by some of the BAMs that it might get caught more in the westerly flow. If it does, it's probably very weak, and I see that as unlikely at this point in time. Now, one that I don't see as unlikely to move west is Tropical Storm Gaston. As of 5 p.m., Tropical Storm Gaston was at 12.9 north, 37.0 west. Winds were 40 gusting to 50. It's moving straight west at 1,005 millibars. Expected to eventually move west-northwest, but as the ridging rebuilds, push on back west and be a hurricane by the start of the new work week, at least Category 1. Many models take it upwards of almost a major hurricane, moving straight west towards the northern islands. Beyond that is too early to say, but I do think there is the potential that eventually this one could get much more into the Bahamas than Earl ever did, and potentially more towards areas further west. If it takes the southern edge of this cone, it's probably in the Caribbean, taking a track much like Hurricane Dean did just 3 fast years ago. Here's the model guidance, and you can see there's not a lot of consistency. Some of the models are up here, but some loop it around. And the reason for all this looping is once that trough moves off in the next few days, pushing Earl and Fiona out, there's not going to be a whole lot to move this hurricane. By then it'll be a hurricane, which might be sitting in this region or maybe down here. So it's either going to slow down or it's going to get shoved back west or both. So if this thing moves northwest, there's still the chance that it could end up slowing down and getting pushed back west. Of course, that'll likely happen further south, but right now it is just unknown. But if you live in the Northern Islands and Puerto Rico, be on the alert because you could have a pretty powerful hurricane. Actually, looking at the latest wind shear profile, here's the latest wind shear. You can see Hurricane Earl has wind shear decreasing over it. Note all the shear from its beautiful outflow here. Fiona actually has an area of low wind shear, but not with Earl's wind shear coming from the north and east over the top of it. However, Gaston has no problems for deepening over the next several days at all. I don't see any reason. In fact, it developed a little quicker than I thought it would, and so we're going to watch this very carefully. As the sun goes down, there's Gaston bursting, looking very impressive as a minimal tropical storm. A better look at it, a little bit more rapid look, shows that it's definitely moving west. It's got good outflow, a little dry. It is going to have to deal with dry air, and as we saw with Hurricane Danielle, that could weaken a system down from a 100-mile-an-hour storm to a tropical storm. However, Danielle came back to a Category 4 hurricane, so you never know with these things. Definitely another Cape Verde hurricane in the making. You can see the last few days here off Africa as we've seen Tropical Storm Gaston develop. Look at this monster wave moving off. Could this be Hermine? Could this be Hermine? Quite possible. I see no reason why it won't. You can see the last 3 days. There went our wave. It wasn't even an invest. It became an invest. Another wave over Africa looking very impressive. And now we have Tropical Storm Gaston and that wave leaving Africa. And definitely Gaston's looking good. And this wave's a mess. But when it's a mess leaving Africa, it's a mess we're going to have to deal with down the road. And that's really the concern at this point in time with these systems. I did want to note really quick, I don't want to keep you too much longer, but here's the Canadian model, takes Earl up and out. It does show Gaston becoming a powerful hurricane, moving straight west towards the islands, and another storm developing off Africa. The GFS is even more eerie. Look at that, makes Gaston a very tiny but ferocious hurricane, heading right for Puerto Rico. But with this trophiness, there's the chance that it might get left behind if it's not showing any real poleward movement. Of course, that's if the GFS pans out. Right now, that is unknown. In fact, if you look at that pattern, we might actually be talking about something pushing back west. Another storm off Africa via the GFS. We'll see what happens. Right now, it's going to be very interesting. I'm Mike Naso from Internet Partnership Radio, keeping you 13 minutes today with a very active tropical Atlantic and continuing coverage of our Category 4 hurricane bearing down on the southeastern United States. I leave you with that image. Speaks for itself. Well-defined eye, great outflow, a powerful Cat 4 headed directly for the United States. I'm Mike Naso from IPR. I'll see you next time.